Okay, good afternoon everybody and welcome to this very special seminar from Trade Guider Systems and TradersPerformingEdge.com. My name's Gavin Holmes, the CEO of Trade Guider Systems based out of Chicago. Delighted to welcome to the Trade Guider room today Dr. Gary Dayton, who is a full-time trader and also a clinical psychologist. You're going to hear a lot about Gary. I'm sure he'll tell you a bit about his background as we go through today's session. This is part one of a two-part session entitled Building Trader Confidence and Minimizing Fear. I'm delighted to welcome to the room Sebastian Mandy and Tom Williams, and also Marty's here as well. So many of the Trade Guider team are in the room as we watch this special presentation from Gary. So without further ado, it's my great pleasure to welcome Dr. Gary Dayton to the Trade Guider room, and I can confirm that we are recording this event and we will make it available for you all as a download with our compliments after part two, which happens in a few weeks' time. So Gary, have a great session, and I'll be, you've got my cell phone for any issues, and look forward to listening in where I can. Over to you, Dr. Gary Dayton.
Great, thanks, Gavin. And gee, I'm just tickled to be here. I really am. This is a lot of fun for me, partly because I am a trader and partly because I am a psychologist, and I have sort of a unique perspective where I'm able to bring both of those things together. And as being a psychologist, you know, I'm very interested in helping people out. It's part of the reason why you get into it. The other part of the reason, of course, is to figure out why you behave the way you do behave. In other words, why did I behave the way I do behave? But that's a topic for a different discussion. We won't really go there today. But I do enjoy helping people, and I know that the struggle with fear and anxiety is a difficult one for traders. And I think, in fact, it is probably the biggest problem traders do have. And we're going to talk a lot about that today, and again on 2 Saturdays from now on the 21st. So, yeah, Sebastian says here, as I'm looking at the chat room going on, he says, emotional behavior in the war zone. That's exactly right. And we're going to talk about how we can drop the ropes, so to speak, on the war zone. The war may be going on, but we don't necessarily have to participate in that. And that's all about the psychology of minimizing your struggle with fear, because it's a real struggle that we have with it. And hopefully I'll be able to give you some insights today, and particularly next time we meet, some specific practical strategies on how to do this. Today we're going to talk a lot about the psychology of stuff, the psychology of fear and anxiety, so you all have a really good handle on that. And we'll be going to touch on some of the areas about how we can begin to handle that, but we really won't get into that until next time we meet on the 21st. Just in terms of logistics, I think we'll go until about the top of the hour, whatever time that is in your time frame. For me, I'm up in New England, so that'll be at just about 4 o'clock. We'll go to the top of the hour, and we'll take a 10-minute break, so people can go grab a cup of coffee or tea, or have a bio break, whatever's needed. But I think it's always a good idea to do that for a long session like this, and hopefully we'll be able to finish up in the 2 hours that are allotted. As Gavin and Sebastian have indicated, it's being recorded, and I saw Chip had asked questions about getting a copy of the recording session, and also somebody asked about getting copies of the PowerPoint presentation, and we'll look into that. I'll talk with Gavin and company about that. And before we start, I just want to say thank you very much to Tom Williams, Gavin Holmes, and Richard Bednall, and the rest of the Trade Guider team for having me be part of Trade Guider. It's a real thrill for me because I do trade with volume spread analysis and the Wyckoff method. I think it's a really, for me it's a proven system. I think it's a really wonderful system. As I said to Tom in in San Francisco when we were presenting down there, I didn't think that Tom was just the master of the markets. I think he's also the master of the psychology of the markets, because a lot of good psychology is built into volume spread analysis, and we'll touch a little bit on that as well. Ask questions if you like, and we'll get started. Oh, I guess I'm in charge of the slides today. When I've done these in the past, it's always Gavin who runs this. So I always like to start things with a quote. And this is a quote I think is really pertinent to the discussion at hand. This comes from Ralph Waldo Emerson, who, by the way, hated being called Waldo. So Ralph Emerson, he was an early American writer, and probably the greatest champion of individualism and self-reliance in the literary history. In fact, he wrote a wonderful piece on self-reliance and got in trouble for some of his writings from the powers that were at the time of his writing. He wrote in the early part of American history. Much of American ideology is built from Ralph Emerson's and Henry David Thoreau's writings. And here, this quote I like a lot. It says, "The task ahead is never as great as the power behind us." The task ahead is never as great as the power behind us. I think it's a wonderful thing, and I think it's very true. And I put it here for anybody who's struggling with fear and anxiety and not really sure if you'll ever make it as a trader. I understand this really well. I mean, I understand the feeling very well. I've been there. I won't go into the sort of the tear stories that I have about that, but in the beginning and for a very long time, I had a real struggle with fear and anxiety, and I carried that baggage with me in my trading. So I understand this, and I also understand that the power truly is behind us when we try to confront this task. So it's just something good to keep in mind, I think. I assume everybody here was in the preview, one of the two previews that I did over the last few weeks. And in that preview, I asked two questions. I asked people if they experienced fear and struggle on a fairly frequent basis during their trading. And they all said pretty much yes. Not everybody, but most folks did. And I asked this question: would you be interested in trading more confidently while minimizing the struggle with fear? Trading more confidently while minimizing the struggle with fear. And not surprisingly, people responded affirmatively to that. Almost everybody responded yes. Now, in that first question, we say minimize the struggle with fear. It's important to remember that we can never get rid of fear entirely. We talked about this in those preview sessions. Fear and anxiety are hardwired, and it serves us really well at times in many situations. If if we don't see a truck coming into our lane and all of a sudden do see it, it's that flight-fight response that we talked about in the preview to this webinar. It's that flight-fight response that gets us out of those fearful situations. So it's very protective. But it's not so good when we're trading day after day and we're struggling with it. It really does detract with our trading. Interestingly, over the summer, Stock Futures and Options asked a related question to their magazine subscribers. They asked this question. They said, which emotion is the toughest for you to control when trading? Is it hope, or is it fear, or is it greed? And I know it's a loaded question in this particular webinar, because you all probably know the answer. But here's what they published in August of 2008. They found that fear was cited 2.5 times as frequently as hope and greed. Right? Fear being the biggest or the hardest emotion, toughest emotion to control when trading. So this poll at least confirms what we found in the preview event. Fear is very common among traders, very common experience for almost everyone. It occurs for almost everyone quite frequently. And it's difficult to, and I'm going to put this in quotes, control. I put quotes in around control for a reason, and I think that reason will become apparent as we go on in this webinar this afternoon. But the real point here is that you really can't control it all that well. And we can't control our thoughts and our feelings as well as we might think we would like to control them. And I'll talk more about why that is and how that comes to be as we get on. So this also is pretty, the responses to the preview and the responses to the Stock Futures Options magazine is pretty consistent with what I see. I work with traders on a one-to-one basis, helping them with their performance. And most traders come because of some sort of a fear-based challenge in their trading. It's probably the most common thing that I see. Now, I usually work with them, and frankly, it doesn't take all that long, but usually over 8 or 12 weeks or 8 or 12 sessions if we meet once a week. And I'm going to try to cram that all in just 2 sessions with you, or cram most of that in just 2 sessions with you. So I'm going to cover an awful lot of ground with you today and the next time we meet. All right. Mark Douglas wrote a pretty good book, I think. It's called Trading in the Zone. And it's got a lot of positive aspects to it in many respects. And it's a good book to read just in general. He talks about fear, and he talks about probabilistic thinking and kind of he approaches the optimal mindset of a trader. So if you haven't read that book, or if you haven't read it in a while, it's a good thing to pick up and read or reread. But he identified 4 primary trading fears, and these are the ones that I hear an awful lot. He talks about the fear of being wrong, and I actually think this is the big one. It kind of goes like, if I'm wrong in my trade, what does that say about me as a person? When you get right down to the actual thoughts and images that people have in their head, this is a big one. But it's their ego that gets hooked into this. And the fear just kind of fans the flame of the ego being hooked. So that's one that he identified. Losing money is another one. And no one likes to lose money, right? We come up with all different kinds of strategies not to lose money, different ways to set our stops or even not set our stops, setting up different trades, different criteria, and so on and so forth. But really, it's a part of the process, isn't it? I mean, we really can't escape losing money, and there's a reason for that. And the basic reason is that trading is a probabilistic enterprise. It means that not every trade is going to work out 100%. There's a probability. No matter how good the setup is, or no matter how good it worked the last 2 or 3 or 5 times that we used it, it doesn't mean that it's going to work out this time. If we have a 70% chance, 70% win-loss ratio where 70% are winners and 30% are losers over a long series of trades, we have a 30% chance of losing on any given trade in that particular, with that particular setup. So losing money is a fear, but it's a reality, and there's nothing we can do about it. We just can't escape it, though we try. We also have the fear of missing out. This leads to overtrading. We see a trade that occurs, and we see a market movement, I should say, not a trade. We see a market movement that occurs. It's outside of our trading zone, but we're fearful of missing out, so we want to get in that trade. We jump in on anything that looks attractive or pretty, and we all know that we're usually buying at the highs or selling at the lows on widespread with large volume coming in, and it's not the time to be making that trade, although that's when those trades seem to be most attractive to us. And there's also fear of leaving money on the excuse me, on the table. It's kind of the thought that goes through your head on this is, I didn't make as much money as I should have made. And there's a strong tendency now, if that occurs on your one trade, the next trade is going to be influenced by that. We might hold on longer than we should, and we wind up not making as much money. We give money back to the market rather than leaving it on the table. So there's a lot of different ways to trigger fear. A lot of different thoughts go through our minds that are prompted by market action and our particular situation at the moment in our trading. There's no one way that this occurs. And also, stock futures and options asked about hope and greed, and they juxtaposed it against fear. But, you know, I think that hope and greed can also be considered forms of fear. And I'll just explain that a little bit. You know, holding on to a loser is really an expression of hope, hoping that it's going to rally back up to where we can break even or show a little bit of a profit. You know, this is a fear of being wrong. I don't really want to be wrong. And it's a fear of losing money. That's where hope kind of comes in my judgment anyway. So I'll hold on, hoping I won't take a loss because I'm afraid of taking a loss. And my ego is sort of sensitive to being wrong. It always wants to be right. And greed, overtrading, is a factor of greed or a representation of greed, and that's really the fear of missing out, fear of leaving money on the table. There's just so much money to be made, I've got to make it all, and I'm fearful of not getting that. Or it's a fear of not getting it all, and therefore we wind up holding on to trades too long. So just as a quick recap, we have the fear of being wrong, hooking our ego, the fear of losing money, which no one likes but is just part and parcel of trading, the fear of missing out, and the fear of not getting all of the profit. And they're all fear-based, and as we just talked about, hope and greed can also be a part of fear. The main point, though, is that however we define fear or however we see it, all fear affects our trading behavior, and that's the key thing. Now, we talked a lot about what happens when we become fearful in the preview sessions. I'll go over them briefly here. These sessions both were recorded and are both available in the archives on the Trade Guider site. So if by chance you weren't in the preview, or if you forgot or feel like you want to be reminded or refreshed of some of that material, you can go back and listen in. Both of those are, as I say, on the archive, and both are free for people who want to download to listen. But what we talked about is that fear really has a global effect on us. It affects our mind, our body, and our feelings. In terms of our mind, we get racing thoughts and ruminations. We can't stop thinking about what's making us fearful. And our mind just keeps going over and over and over and over again about what we are concerned with. Interesting thing about this. In a few studies that have been done with elite athletes and their thought processes, they find that cognitive activity, cognitive is just a fancy word, or fancy way of saying thought. So the level of thoughts in elite performers is low compared to everybody else. They're not thinking all that much. They still have negative thoughts, interestingly enough, these studies show. They still have negative feelings as well. But they've figured out a way not to let them bother them. And because of that, they tend to focus more on their tasks at hand, their performance tasks, rather than on their thoughts and their feelings. If Tiger Woods, for example, focused on the flutters in his heart and the specific, the thoughts that he had, am I going to make this shot, am I going to make this putt, or am I not going to make this putt? He knows that that would not be very conducive to making that stroke and that putt. So even though he has those thoughts, and even though he has those feelings, he acts in the service of good golfing behavior, if you will, instead of acting in the service of his fear. Right? I'll get more into this as we go on. We also talked about body, how it affects our body, sensations, body muscle tension, our heart rate increases, our breathing tends to come up into the top of our lungs rather than being deeper in the lower section of our abdomen. Our pulse rate quickens, we start to get sweaty, all of those symptoms. Blood drains out of the feet and the hands and the arms, making our hands feel a little numb perhaps, or tingly or cold. Blood also drains out of our thinking center of the brain, and it goes into the emotional and the movement centers of the brain, mainly because the body doesn't want us to be thinking when we're under stress. It wants us to act, and it wants us to feel what we should be doing rather than to be thinking. Thinking is a much more ponderous and slow way to come to a decision. Feeling and action are much quicker. And we also have feelings of fear and anxiety, apprehension. It's uncomfortable. The nervousness is uncomfortable, no question about it, and we feel all of that. So when we have these feelings of stress and fear, it affects us globally. We talked a little bit about the fight-flight response. It's an automatic response to help us deal with threats. And as I said earlier, when a truck is about to hit us, it's great, but it's not so great when we perceive or imagine a threat coming off of our computer screens and our charts. We also learn as a conditioned response to fear the market. We pair losses and stressful experiences with the experience of watching the chart day after day, and this pairing, just like the Pavlovian dogs responding to a bell and salivating when it was paired with the food that they were getting, this pairing creates an anxiety with us. And so we actually learn, without our real conscious knowledge, we learn quite quickly how to fear the market if we're not careful. So left unchecked, fear and anxiety are quite toxic to our trading. We talked about this in the preview. It leads to erratic trading and therefore poor trading results. Fear has a direct result on our bottom line because it influences us to trade poorly. It's also quite damaging to our health, and we talked about that as well. All of the different medical problems from cancer to high blood pressure, stress and anxiety are implicated in all of that, chronic stress. And if trading can be a chronically stressful lifestyle and job. And it also affects our self-esteem. And as I said, everybody pretty much experiences this. So let's look a little bit more carefully at this to see what happens to most traders. And I call this a vicious cycle of fear and stress. We have a series starting at the top here. We have a series of losses or significant losses. We learn to fear the market. We get into this stress response when we're fearful or when we're anxious that creates all of this bodily and mental and emotional sensations that we have that leads us to erratic trading. And we continue, that produces more losses for us. We continue to be fearful of the market. It continues to create the stresses and the strains in our body, mind, and emotions, leading more to erratic trading, and the cycle goes on and on and on without interruption. It goes on and on and on without interruption until eventually the trader either blows up their account or they burn out. burning out means you just get tired. You can't take this anymore. You're not winning. It doesn't make any sense. You're stressed all the time. You're getting, concern from your family and friends, and you finally just give up. I think this is a big reason why the statistic of 90 or 95% of all traders fail at trading. I think this is a big part of the answer to it. Now, I'm going to show you how to break this cycle, partly today and more so on the 21st. But there is a way to break this cycle, and I will show it to you. But before we do, let's just talk a little bit about how traders try to cope with fear. And I think there's three basic ways in my experience. Many try to improve the technical side. They look for additional information maybe to support a trade. They already know the trade is a good setup, but because of their fear, they're going to seek more information to support them taking that trade and to alleviate some of their fear. Okay? We call this confirmation bias. And frankly, in VSA and Wyckoff, you really do not have to do this, but people do it anyway. They also look for the ideal indicator. We call this the holy grail, right? And a sort of more subtle way people try to cope or handle fear is they try to seek out trades with high win-loss ratios. This is part of loss aversion. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a few moments, but here's a question just to kind of step back a little bit. Which would you rather have, a trade with a 90% win-loss ratio or a trade with a 60% win-loss ratio? Which would you guys rather have? Just type in here, 90 or 60. Would you rather have 90% winners or 60% winners? Ramaya says 60, Gordon 90. Tom knows the story. 90, 90, 90. Eric says it depends on the return. Yeah, that's right. Eric and Tom, you get the gold stars here for today. It really depends on what the risk is and what the rewards are. You can have a 90% win-loss ratio and still lose money. You can have a 60% win-loss ratio and make a lot of money. It depends on what you're risking and what you're gaining out of each time that you make that risk. So a high win-loss ratio isn't always the best answer here. Another sort of category that people do is that they attempt to avoid losses. We're going to talk a lot about avoidance today and how that acts against us and operates to just continue to reinforce and amplify fear-based behaviors. But in general, people try to lock in a sure gain when they're in a profitable trade. So they might make a small amount when, if they held on longer, they would have made a larger amount. And they're trading based on their fear, not based on the VSA principles, right? And they might be holding losers too long, hoping not to take a loss, hoping to avoid that loss. And that's loss aversion. And the other thing that they do is they try to exercise psychological control, mainly through suppressing thoughts and emotions. They want to get more disciplined. They try to be more mentally tough. We'll talk much more about this today and why it's so, excuse me. We'll talk more about this today and why suppressing thoughts and suppressing emotions is highly ineffective and the thing you really do not want to do. But before we get to that, let's just look at some of the more non-psychological things that people do. More and better analysis does not solve the problem of fear. Now, this assumes that you have an edge in your trading, and of course, VSA is a good edge. It's, trying to get more information is often our first response to an uncertain situation. It's usually to look for more data or more confirmation. We call this the confirmation bias. Here's an interesting study. I want to go through this with you. It's a study of horse race handicappers, people who bet on the horses, the parimutuel bettors. And it's a study of 4 different trials. The trials are down along the bottom of the graph, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And in each trial, the horse bettors were given more and more information. And the information is on the left-hand column, and it goes from 0 to 45, right? So the green line here is the pieces of information. So in the very first trial, they were given 5 pieces of information about their horses that they could bet on that given day or on that given run of that race. In the next trial, trial number 2, they doubled it, and they gave them 10 pieces of information. Trial number 3, they doubled that again, and they gave them 20 pieces, and then, of course, you can see by the time they got to trial number 4, they gave them 40 pieces of information. Okay? They kept adding the information up. Now, the blue line is interesting, too. This is a line that represents the confidence that the horse bettors had in their bets. And you can see that as the information went up, their confidence also rose, right? But look at the accuracy. That's the red line in the middle here. It's pretty flat. What does that say? It says that accuracy was just as good with 5 pieces of information as it was with 40 pieces, 8 times as much information. Okay? But here's the rub to this. With more information, they became more confident, and that's deceptive because the risk here is that you become unsoundly overconfident the more you add information on. Okay? And again, we call this confirmation bias, and it's, as I say, it's seeking additional information in the face of uncertainty to support what you already know. You've got a trade here. It's set up properly. There's no reason you need to check something else or get additional pieces of information, but when we're under fear and anxiety, it's often the first thing we do. And I guess the classic example of this, and we don't see this so much in VSA, but a classic example is that if you're using a MACD to help you frame your trades, and you see a good trade set up on the MACD, you say, oh, wait a minute, I've got to check the RSI or the stochastic just to make sure, right? That's confirmation bias. It's an unnecessary piece of information for a trade you already know meets your plan and meets your setup and should be taken. The same thing is with the Holy Grail. And this is why seeking the Holy Grail out never works. Adding new information or going to different information isn't going to work for you. Okay? That's the fallacy behind looking for different information. I like this study. It's not with traders, but it's very similar. Parimutuel bettors operate in a probabilistic field just like traders do. And so even though it's not exactly a group of traders being studied, the results and the situations are analogous to trading, and I like this a lot. You know, the thing here too is that we really want disconfirmation, not confirmation. George Soros talks about this in one of his books, and I forget the quote exactly, but he said, you know, people who try to confirm what you already know, there's lots of them. It's the folks who are trying to disconfirm something in the market. Those are the special folks that you want to pay attention to. And see if you can follow me on this. I know disconfirmation might be a stretch for us a little bit, but let's say we see a sign of strength in the market. What do we look for next in VSA? And I'll try to explain this disconfirmation. Tell me what you would see, what you would look for next. Are we looking for a narrow bar coming into where we saw the sign of strength, or are we looking for a widespread bars? What specific things are we looking for? Can you guys type that in? Yes, signs of a diminishing supply or a test, as Tom says, or testing. I guess that might be a new VSA symbol. Or Jerry says test or no supply. Exactly right. That's okay, Tom. Bad typing. That's exactly right. We're looking for a test after a sign of strength, and when we see a sign of weakness, we're looking for the opposite of a test, which is no demand, as Tom calls our friends, no demands and tests. And they confirm that there's strength in the market, right? But they're disconfirming something. A test is disconfirming supply, right? No demand is disconfirming an interest in the professional trader to go higher for demand. So there's disconfirmation going on. That's why one of the reasons why I say that VSA is so psychologically sophisticated. It has built into it wonderful little things for us like this, and it's helpful to know these things. We don't need additional information. We only need that test. We only need that no demand when we see a sign of strength or a sign of weakness, because it disconfirms additional strength or additional weakness, whatever the case may be. Everybody pretty clear on that? All right, let me go on here to loss aversion. There's really two sides to loss aversion, and we talked about this in the preview a lot, so I'll just kind of gloss over this. It's a bias in our mental machinery, probably hardwired, but generally people have a significant aversion to loss when they make choices involving risk, and of course trading involves lots of risk. It's one of the reasons why we look for high win-loss ratio trades. Traders are happier when they are right frequently, and that's to kind of kill off, if you will, the fear of being wrong. They lock in the sure gain early when they're in a profitable trade. Again, we're locking in that sure gain to satisfy the desire to be right. But the backside of that is that we're cutting our winners short, and it's not good trading behavior. You know, when we look at loss from a psychological point of view, study after study after study shows this, and it doesn't matter what the size of the loss or the size of the gain is. It can be small or large. It comes up the same, and it's across all different kinds of losses and wins. But loss has about 2.5 times the psychological impact of a gain of a similar size. So for example, as I said this in the preview, if you have a win of $1,000, that's great, right? We all feel happy about that. But if you have a loss of $1,000, it feels like we lost $2,500, not just $1,000. The loss aversion has a way of magnifying losses for us to about 2.5 times. So we tend not to want to take losses, and that leads us to holding on to losers far too long in the hopes that we don't take a loss. And again, it's fear-based. I fear taking that loss. So as we talked about before, these are totally inconsistent with sound trading practices, but almost anybody who is locked into a fear or anxiety, coping with fear and anxiety will do this. It's very common in trading. All right, then we talked a little bit also about psychological control. In the effort to reduce anxiety, traders attempt to fix it. And you just can't. I'm sorry to say, I don't mean to disillusion you, but anxiety is a natural response. Fear is a natural response, as we talked about. It has its positive sides to it. We would not have survived as a species if we didn't have this fight-flight response. We wouldn't survive as a species if we couldn't learn what causes us harm and learn to be fearful of that. All right. Traders, nevertheless, and people, just in general, try to suppress thoughts and emotions. They say, well, I just won't think about my fearful thoughts. or they engage in positive self-talk, positive thoughts, and positive imagery. I'll just sort of change my thoughts to the positive side. I'll develop greater willpower and discipline. I'll just force myself to not be anxious and not be fearful. I don't know if any of you have tried this, but if you have any of these things worked for you, or do you think that any of these things would work? Give you a chance to respond here. Yep, haven't worked yet, and they never work. Good. And Brian says no. And that's the truth. They don't work. And I tried forcing patience, but not so good. Imagine that. I'm forcing to be patient. Yes, it does seem like a good idea, Jacques. Absolutely. It seems like the perfect idea to do. Our minds are geared that way. We are very good at gathering information. We're very good at comparing and contrasting. We're excellent at evaluating, and we're very good at problem solving. If we were locked in a room and had no way to get out, we could think through different ways, different options to get out, right? It's not that difficult to do. Or if we wanted to make improvements to our living room, we could think of things, we could problem solve how to do that. If we wanted to make a better water bottle, I mean, pick your thing. If we wanted to make a better water bottle, we could compare an idea, a plan, with an existing water bottle or a sample of water bottles that we considered meeting good criteria, good qualifications. And we could compare and contrast our ideas against the existing. We could look to see where we could improve on those, problem solve how to do that, and produce a better water bottle if we wanted to do that. Our mind is geared to that, and it's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. If we have a car that's broken and we need to have it fixed, we bring it to the auto repair shop to get it fixed. It's not so good when we are working on things internally, when we're talking about psychological things. It's very easy for us to compare ourselves, for example, against somebody else. I compare myself against, for example, Tom Williams in my trading, and I find myself falling short. Now, it's easy then to immediately go into a thought of, oh, I'm not good as Tom, or I'm not good enough. And then that starts a depressive process, a psychological depressive process. We'll continue to problem solve how to get good, but typically we don't do that. We kind of run up against that wall and we start to feel bad. So it may seem like a good idea, Jacques, but it's really not. And this is the reason why it doesn't work. Fixing our insides, it just hasn't worked, as most people, and we're going to go through an exercise in the next couple of weeks, because I'm going to ask you to go through how you've coped. And I want you to experience this for yourself. Don't just take my words for it, because my words are my words, and my experience can be different than yours. You really need to experience this stuff to be able to make the changes that you're looking to make. And I've set up some what I call action items for us to do over the course of the next 2 weeks between this session and the next session. A series of things that I think will be helpful for you. All right, let's go on here. There's a paradox, too. Part of the reason why it doesn't work is, as I talked about with the mind, and how it's great for problem solving on the outside, in the world of things, but not so great problem solving in our internally, in our psychology. Here's one of the things that it does do, though, when it tries to problem solve. We say to ourselves, I don't want to think about that thought anymore. I just want to think about good thoughts. I want to suppress those negative, bad thoughts and those bad emotions, those scary thoughts and that fear. Well, new science is showing that when we tell our mind we don't want fearful thoughts or we don't want fearful emotions, our minds actually start scanning for these fearful thoughts and these fearful emotions. It actually starts looking for them. And you know what? When it finds them, it brings them right up into our consciousness. It brings our attention right to them. So trying to suppress them has the paradoxical effect of actually making them more frequent. Unbelievable as it may sound, that's what happens to us. Not only that, but when we do think those thoughts again, even though we've tried to suppress them, we have what's known as a rebound effect. It's a psychological term, but it basically means that when it comes back in greater force. So when we try to suppress our thoughts, our mind starts scanning for them. When it finds one, it brings our attention right to that thought, and that thought is more amplified than it would have than it had been in the past, and than it would be if we just sort of tripped over it and came to it because of an experience in the environment. So these are some key ideas we're going to come back to in a little bit, but trying to solve the problem through suppression and changing thoughts and having more discipline actually has the reverse effect. So you don't really want to do that. And what happens with us is that we get distracted from what I call a task-relevant focus. And what do I mean by task-relevant focus? It's a focus on behaviors relevant to and specific to good trading. It's another key idea we're going to come back to. But we're behaving all the time. You're sitting there in your chairs listening to this. Sitting and listening are behaviors. You might be taking notes. Those are writing is a behavior. Behavior is anything that you can observe and that actually happens, that you can measure, and that basically everybody who is observing can agree that that behavior has occurred. Okay? And a task-relevant focus is a focus on behaviors that are conducive and promote good trading. And trying to suppress thoughts, trying to think in positive terms and imagery, and those kinds of things are not task-relevant. They take us away from good trading behaviors, good trade management behaviors, and they take our focus elsewhere. And part of all of this discussion that we're having this week and next is to begin to clarify those task irrelevant behaviors that we do, fear-based behaviors, so that we know them and we can recognize them when they start to emerge, and to begin to take the time away from them, take the struggle away from them, and put more time into task-relevant behaviors in our trading. And I'll talk more about that as we go along. All right. What makes fear and anxiety such a problem for us? Part of the answer is that it's our culture in a way. In general, anxiety and fear are seen to be a major obstacle to life in the West. We have this Western notion, even in healthcare, and even in psychology, that too much anxiety is just bad. It's very entrenched, and we all tend to buy into it. But yet there are successful people out there in all kinds of professions, not just trading, but public speaking, athletics, being a lawyer, being a surgeon or a physician. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. They all have anxiety, they all have fear, and yet they continue to practice their profession and do it well. So it's not having the anxiety or the fear that's so much the issue. And we'll talk more about why that is. But now I'm going to give you a warning, and I'm going to begin to talk about things that may be and probably will be difficult to get your mind around. okay? Some things at first are going to seem confusing perhaps, but that's okay. I'm just going to ask you not to get frustrated, and I'm going to ask you simply to keep an open mind. And I'm going to ask you to check this against your own experience and not just take my words for it, okay? But what I'm telling you here and what I'm going to tell you next time we meet is not conventional wisdom. It's not, you know, the Psychology Today magazine telling you how to fix your fear. It's not Cosmopolitan or Redbook or any of those other grocery store magazines that are doing a psychology section about how to deal with your anxiety, because that's all going to be conventional wisdom. What I'm going to talk to you about is something much different than that. In fact, it's totally different than that. And odds are good that you will not have heard this before. But nevertheless, it's based on solid scientific research, not just in clinical where people are dealing with mental problems, but we're talking about basic research here, the research that looks at what triggers thoughts and memories and why they can be so painful and how you can deal best with them. And interestingly enough, human performance and sports psychology is beginning to pick this up. They're more advanced than we are in trading. Sport in particular uses psychologists, uses lots of sports psychologists. And they're beginning to not just pick this up and use this, but they're beginning to do a lot of research on this. And the research is all coming back with good effect. So you're getting cutting edge material here. And that's what I want to show you. But as I say, I want to give you that warning because some of this is going to be hard and some of it's going to be difficult to get your mind around. Your mind is going to be looking to fix the problem. That's what the mind does, and that's okay. You can thank your mind for that thought, but try to be open about what I'm talking about. We're not broken. We are not broken. Even though it may feel that way at times, we are not broken. We're stuck, not broken. And I'm going to show you how to become less stuck so you can do the things that matter. And when I say we're stuck in the dealing of fear and dealing of anxiety rather than in dealing with the things that matter, the task-relevant behaviors that we want to promote in trading, okay? And George, no, when you create a series of note cards to enforce a good habit, that would not do you more harm than good. Those are just a nice little reminder. And next week I'm going to show you how to use not note cards per se, but a set of a model, if you will, or a little a model is probably a good way to say it, a model that you can keep on your trading desk and you can use as a note card to enforce good, what we call mindfulness and noticing behaviors in how to deal with the fears and the anxieties that you have. So the note cards are great. What I'm going to show you is, I hope, you can use it as note cards as well, and will be another really good aid for you in that regard. So no, those are not, unless you're saying suppress my thoughts and be disciplined and all of that sort of thing, and actively trying to do that. It's more the action of trying to do that that becomes problematic. All right, so let's go into why fear is such a problem for us. And this basic cutting-edge science has found four main factors. We called it fusion, evaluation, avoidance, and reason-giving. And they created this. I didn't create this, but scientists have created this with the FEAR acronym there. So it's kind of clever that they did that. The most important ones, I'll tell you in advance, are fusion and avoidance. Okay? But the other two, evaluation and reason-giving, are also important. All right. So what is this fusion thing anyway, and what does it mean to me? Fusion is responding to thoughts and words and images and memories and sensations. Thoughts, words, images, and memories that are coming into your mind and sensations that are coming into your body. Responding to those as if they're the same thing as the experiences or the events that they're describing. We're treating them as if they're the same thing as the event or the same thing as the experience. And the best way that I can show you what this is all about is through a little experiential exercise. So I'm just going to ask you for the moment to sit back, relax, and just experience what I'm about to tell you, okay? I have in front of me a yellow fruit. I just picked this off the tree, and it's very, very ripe, and I can tell it's full of juice and fruit, and it's very yellow. Now, some of you may be thinking that I have a lemon, and you would be right, I do. Now, I'd like you, if you're willing to continue with this, just to imagine that ripe yellow fruit, that ripe yellow lemon, just imagine it in your mind's eye, okay? I'm taking that lemon, and I've put it down on my cutting board, and with my knife, if you can imagine this, I'm taking my knife and I'm slicing through the lemon, and juice flows out all over the cutting board, and I can already smell the scent of the lemon. Now, I'd like you to imagine that I'm holding this cut lemon right up in front of you, up over your head, and you open your mouth and I squeeze. All that lemon juice going into your mouth. All right. How many of you puckered up? How many of you notice more saliva in your mouth? I'm not sure which is who here, Eric or Debbie, but they both say yes. Brian says yes. Scott says yes. Yeah. Both are here. Okay, great. Eric and Debbie. That's terrific. So pretty much everybody experienced that, and that's not a surprise at all. If I put an electrode on you, and psychologists do this, we could measure the muscle movement in your mouth and in your jaw, and we could also measure the increase in saliva. And your saliva would definitely increase. In fact, my mouth watered just talking about this. Well, this is fusion, folks. This is fusion. We're responding to the words and the images as if they were a real lemon being squeezed into your mouth and you could taste that juice. But there wasn't any lemon and there wasn't any juice. You were just fused with the words and the images. All right? You just saw or responded to those words and images as if they were there. And you responded in a real way. It's a natural function. We do that all the time with words because of the way in which we use words and symbols. This is part of the basic science that I'm talking about. It's the first time in the history of psychology that we're actually doing the basic science, that actually the basic science was done before the practical therapies and interventions were created. And that's why this stuff is so new. All right. This is fusion, all right? We imagine that lemon being squeezed and we responded to it. Well, we do the same thing with thoughts and images of fear. And thoughts are just words. Here, look, If we were out, put yourself in the setting of a campfire in the middle of the night, camping out, and then somebody starts talking about some chainsaw axe murderer killing, Bloody Mary or whatever. You would have a fear response. You would definitely have that. It's the same thing. We are just responding like we did with the lemon, even though it's just thoughts and images. Does everybody get this idea? Let me know with a Y or an N, because it's important. Good. Good, 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 good. Good. This is fusion, and this is why fear is so difficult. All right, let's take a little break. I see it's the top of the hour. Let's take a little bit of a break, and we'll be back in, I see my clock says 4:04. Let's make it let's make it 10 minutes. Let me ask this question. Would it be a problem if I go over by 15 or 20 minutes to today, or would that be a problem? Not a problem, not a problem, no problem, no problem. Okay. Good. Okay, I'm assuming no means no problem not to not go over. All right, so I probably will go over a little bit. I apologize for that. But I can always stop and we'll do it. We'll finish it up, next time. So let's take a break, get a cup of coffee, do whatever you need to do, and I'll see you in 10. Two, one. And I assume we're recording. Now, before we get back on, yes, it started to record, I see on the screen. So before we, I made a little error here, and that is that I have a set of handouts for you, a little workbook, if you will, because I am trying to cram, 8 to 12 sessions or hours of information in about a third of the time or less. So I thought it would be really helpful if we did some things between the two sessions so that you would both learn more and it would be more reinforcing for you. So, but I don't have that loaded up here. I'm going to ask you, and I checked with Gavin to make sure this was okay, and Gavin says this is fine, just to send me an email. And here's my email address. It's drgary@peakpsychology.com. I'm just going to ask you to send an email to me and just put fear seminar or something along those lines on the subject line. You don't even have to say anything in the body. Just so that I have your email, and later on this afternoon or tonight, or this morning, whatever your time zone happens to be, I will send you out via email the handouts, the workbooks, and we're going to discuss those as we go along. Okay, so just send me an email, and I will get those out to you. Thank you. Now, let's go back to fusion. We had that experience with the lemon, and that's how we treat our thoughts and words and images and even memories and such and sensations as if they are the same thing that they are describing to us. I described the lemon, and you could see it, and you could feel the juice, and so on and so forth. A wonderful acronym to describe the fusion process is this: false evidence appearing real. Nothing in the lemon was actual and true. It didn't exist in reality, and yet it appeared real. Same thing is true with fear and anxiety. It appears real. Our thoughts appear as if there's something we have got to react to. They just seem real to us, and yet we're fused at that point with our thoughts and our images. Thoughts are just words. All right, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But we set into motion our anxiety and fear when we feed into these unpleasant thoughts and feelings by getting fused with them. So a critical thing you must do is you need to respond, getting confused here. A critical question is, do you need to respond to them as if they are what they say they are, or can you treat them as what they really are? Just thoughts composed of words, just fleeting memories, and just bodily sensations. The key idea with fusion is that thoughts are just thoughts, sensations just sensations. You don't need to become them. All right, now, your mind might be saying to you right now, yeah, well, when I get into a trade, I'm afraid, and that's real. All right, some of you may be thinking that, and that's not surprising, and that's fairly natural. And not fairly natural, it is natural. So thank your mind for that thought. All I ask again is that you be open to what I'm suggesting here. Have you ever had a trade? Here's a good question that you can ask yourself. Have you ever had a trade and your mind says, quick, get out, it's going to be a loser, you got to lock in the profit, or just get out, you don't want to take a loss. And you respond to that because you're fused. You respond to it. And then what happens? Then the market goes on, the market moves in your direction, and you would have made a lot of points or a lot of pips or a lot of money had you stayed in the trade. But you didn't. And what does your mind say to you at that point? Stupid. Why didn't you stay in that trade? What's wrong with you? Have you guys ever had that experience? Which was, yes, of course. We all have. I used to have that experience regularly, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Yeah, it sounds like an echo. So which was the false evidence appearing real? Or were they both? Was the false evidence appearing real the thought that told you to get out of the trade? Or was it the thought that called you stupid? Why didn't you stay in? Or were they both? You know, for now, just consider the idea that anxious suffering is set into motion and made worse when you feed these unpleasant thoughts and feelings by getting tangled up and fused with them. Now, you might be saying, is he saying that my fear and anxiety aren't real? Absolutely not. I'm not saying that at all. The sensations, the thoughts, the images, they're all there, and they're all real in the sense that they're part of your experience. No question about that. But what I'm asking you to do is asking you to look at what you are responding to. Are you responding to your thoughts as thoughts and sensations as sensations? Or are your actions steered and driven by the way you view these experiences? And the way that by the way that you view these experiences as if they were real and not just thoughts and images. That's what I'm asking. When your mind told you to get out of that trade, that it's going to lose, and you did, then told you were stupid for not staying in, and you felt bad about that, did you treat the thoughts as just thoughts or as something different? Well, we were treating them as if they were reality, but they weren't reality. We were fused to them. We were treating them like the images of the lemon and the juice falling into our mouth, like they were real, but they aren't, or they weren't. What if you had this thought? What if the thought came through your mind, I'm a banana. I'm a banana. Did having this thought turn you into a banana? Not doubtful, right? Is this thought any more true or any more false than any other thought that your mind might throw at you, either now or then or later on, later today? Thoughts are different than the events they describe, and your mind generates thoughts constantly. And I'm going to teach you how to step back and diffuse and disentangle from those thoughts. Here's a different way, another way to think about it. We're looking at thoughts rather than looking through thoughts. We're trying to take the thoughts that you have and setting them out apart from you a little bit, setting them in front of you, giving you a little bit of distance, and seeing them for what they are, not for what they say they are. And not only did I think them, I journaled those exact words. Great. Good. Journaling is excellent. And I'm going to ask you to do a little journaling in a little bit, too, in the next couple of weeks. And Jerry asks, is intuition a thought? I'm not saying, Jerry, that all thoughts are negative or all thoughts ought to be discounted. When we sit down and we plan things out, if we sit the night before the next trading day and we look at the structure of the market, we're looking at the background of the market like we want to do in VSA, right? And we're looking at key support and resistance areas. We're drawing trend lines in. We're drawing, horizontal lines, and we're thinking, it looks like the market could go to this area, and if it does, it's a good short. Now, that's planning out, and those are thoughts, and those are useful thoughts for us to have, and we can jot those down, and we can say, this will be helpful for us tomorrow if the market comes up, shows us a sign of weakness, gives us a no demand, and we can take that short in that resistance area if it comes to that. That's a good thing to do. And that's helpful. Thoughts can be helpful. I'm not saying that thoughts are unhelpful. They're both. They can be helpful or unhelpful. Intuitions are, what's an intuition? That's a good question. I'm not even sure I could define it necessarily. Probably coming out of some past experience we've had, a little bit of an image, and maybe a set of thoughts that come with that. Those are things to note down and pay attention to, I think. Those can be very helpful. But it kind of depends also on your own experience. If you are experiencing an intuition, if you have an intuition and you fuse with that and it doesn't turn out to be all that productive for you, then that's your experience and you don't want to be hanging your hat on your intuitions. On the other hand, if they are coming out and being productive for you and being helpful for you, then you want to pay attention to those. Okay? So we talked about fusion, and that's very important. Evaluating your experience is also part of the anxiety, and we're always evaluating. It's what the mind does. We look at good, bad, right, wrong, happy, sad, fear, calm. Evaluation, there's nothing wrong with evaluations. It's natural, and it helps us with many different things. It's just not so great when we turn it against ourselves, like calling ourselves stupid. We should have stayed in that trade. That was an evaluation of an experience. And the thing is that we know now is that our evaluations of our experiences rarely add to the experience itself. When we buy into and feed our negative evaluations, we're just fueling our struggle with fear and anxiety in an unnecessary way. We're harming ourselves when we evaluate and buy into the evaluations. And there's a really good concept to have when we're thinking about how we treat ourselves. We should be treating ourselves with kindness and compassion. Or a different way to think about it is non-harming. Non-harming. Try to be non-harming with ourselves. Try to be non-harming with other people as well. It's a good way to be, but in particular with ourselves. It's just a good thing to keep in mind. Here's an experience I'll bet many of us, especially the guys in this group, have had. We're driving along in our car. It's a nice day. It's very pleasant. We're having a good time. It's just we've got the radio on maybe. It's our favorite song coming on. We're just in this really wonderful space, so to speak, having a good time. And then some SOB, that's son of a bitch for anybody who's not in the U.S. or in the West, I guess. Some son of a bitch comes along and cuts us off. And we get angry, right? I know that I sure do. My wife will tell you about that. But then an hour later, we're still angry and we want to tell our significant other, you know, Eric is coming in and telling Debbie, you can't believe what that SOB did to us, to me in my car, right? That's what we call being hooked. Try to put this image in your mind, a fish on a hook, on a fish hook. It's jumping around, it's struggling really hard, but it can't get off that hook, right? But that's what it's like when we get hooked into our emotions like this, right? In this case, it's anger. And of course, we all do it. But the key is to notice when we're being hooked. Tension always shows up. It always shows up whenever we're hooked. Another way to think about it is being hijacked, having an emotional hijacking. But hooked kind of gives us a better image, especially a fish on a hook that can't get off and it's jiggling and jumping all around. So begin to notice being hooked. And then notice what you do next. This is beginning noticing, awareness, mindfulness. This is some of the key stuff that we're going to be talking about. And you can, do you think, say, in the next month that you're going to be noticed, that you can notice being hooked? How about in the next week? How about today? How about tonight? Do you think you might begin to notice being hooked and then notice what you do next? And it's not just in trading. I'm not talking about getting hooked into fear in a trading situation. Begin to notice this in your life. Just notice when your emotions get pulled in. Just notice being hooked. Be aware of it. And then notice what you do next. What action are you going to take? This is the beginning of being able to deal with your behaviors and your actions and not be so. This is the beginning of being defused from the thoughts, the images, the memories, the sensations that cause us to be hooked, and that start to give us some freedom in how we choose to act after we're hooked. Okay? So the A part of why anxiety and fear is such a problem for us is the avoidance we have of our experiences. We begin to avoid our experiences. Let's look at this little diagram I drew here. This is all hand-drawn, so it's not maybe the greatest, but we enter into a trade. We have a fearful reaction, that stress response that we've talked about, the fight-flight response. And what do? We start engaging in behaviors like cutting our winners short or other fearful behaviors. We want to escape that, we want to escape that stress and that fear. It gives us temporary relief and we feel good. It gives us a brief honeymoon, so to speak, but that's highly addictive. We know from countless studies on countless different things that when we get temporary relief, it makes it almost 100% that we're going to use that same strategy again and again and again. So each time we get fearful, we get hooked, and then we escape. And we tend to narrow, this is being stuck. We get into a situation, we get into a trading situation, we have a fear response, we escape it, we get temporary relief. And the loop goes on and on and on. We're stuck in this loop. And what happens is it narrows our responses. We behave in the same way again and again and again. And our behavioral repertoire is narrowed down. We're like a narrow spread bar in our behavior in the way that we can respond to the market, so to speak. We want to be a widespread bar. We want to have a wide range of responses. We want to increase our repertoire. But instead, we get caught in this loop because we use this escape response from fear. And that's one of the big reasons why it's so much of a problem for us, because we never get out of it. We get hooked in, we get fused, hooked, and then we try to escape it quickly through a short-term solution, and we never get out of this cycle. But what we really want to do is we want to enter a trade. We're still going to have this fearful response, but we use mindfulness and a committed choice, and I'm going to talk much more about this, particularly next time we meet. It's going to allow us to make a choice to manage the trade, even though we experience the sensations and we have those thoughts. We start to back off from them, diffuse them, and put our attention and our time into things that are more important to us, which is going to be managing the trade. We exit that trade, and whether it's a winner or a loser, we can now reflect on that experience, and we build new skills from that that are going to come into play in the next trade that we enter. And so it goes. It's still going to be, we're still going to have those thoughts and those sensations and those images of fear, but this time around they might be a little bit less. And our mindfulness and our commitment to making proper trading behaviors instead of fear-based behaviors becomes a little bit stronger. We're better able to manage that trade, and we have yet another experience of better managing the trade. And however that trade comes out, we learn from that, we build new skills, and that's the cycle we want to be in. Okay? When we get hooked by fear, we're stuck, and we miss the opportunities not just for profit. That's a part of the pie, but the real key is we miss the opportunities to expand our repertoire. Does everybody see this? Does this make sense to everyone here? Good, good. Excellent. Here's an odd thing, feeding the baby tiger. That's an odd thing to put up here in trading. Pretend for the moment, in psychology we like to do a lot of fantasy stuff, right? Here's a fantasy. Pretend I gave you, maybe for Christmas or your birthday, I gave you a baby tiger. Great present, right? But just go with me with this for a second. I give you this tiger, and it's fun, it's playful, it's a little pup, but it growls, and it's growling, and you feed it, right? And what happens? It stops growling, right? And you go along, and everything is fine, but it growls again. And it growls a little bit louder this time. What do? You feed it out of your bowl, right? Out of your chow bowl. You give it some chow. Well, what happens in this story? The tiger gets bigger, right? The growls get louder and more aggressive. And what do? You feed it out of your chow bowl more and more chow. And you get into this never-ending loop, right? You're basically willing to do anything to shut this tiger up. And you're cursing me, for sure, for giving you this damn thing, right? But you're willing to do anything to shut this up. But step back a second. What are you feeding it? What are you feeding it? Here's the chow out of my trading bowl. Here, take some more chow, tiger. Don't remind me of my fear. What is the question here? What are you feeding your fear from your trading bowl? Think about this for a moment. This is a little metaphor, a little analogy, the tiger being fear. What are you feeding out of your trading bowl? What trading chow are you feeding that tiger? If you start to think about this, since we don't have a lot of time, you're feeding it your skills, your trading skills, because you're trading, your actions are based on emotions rather than put a muzzle on it early. There you go. That's great, Gordon. Thank your mind for that wonderful thought. Yes, you're feeding it your opportunities, your desires. You're feeding it your self-esteem. Look, people don't want to have their feelings growl at them. No question about it. But you know, this tiger never attacks you. If you stop feeding it, what happens to your trading bowl? What happens to your trading chow? You know, it's kind of like asking the question, do you care more about being a trader and trading well or more about feeding your anxiety? That's the real question that's being asked. And what you do with your anxiety is really a choice. Anxiety and fear aren't a choice. We've talked about this. They're a natural response. They come and go. Thoughts come and go, right? But your anxiety, what you do with it, is always a choice. And that choice is asking you this question. Can you feel what it's like to have anxiety right now, not forever, but right now, with, as I said before, a bit of compassion and a bit of kindness for yourself, this non-harming idea? Can you have that? Can you start to do this when you're in a trade? This is where we're going with all of this. This is exactly where we're going. And look, let me tell you, we have these feelings of fear and anxiety because we care about this stuff. And it's not just because we care about whether we're going to win or lose or whether we're going to make money or not. We care about our trading. And it's important to us. It's vital to us as traders. The question just becomes, can we find a way not to fuse with this fear, with these thoughts and sensations and emotions and images and memories that cause this fear? And can we find a way not to avoid it, but to do something different with it? We also, part of the problems with fear and anxiety is reason giving. We naturally give reasons for our actions, and fear and intensity are really good reasons not to do something. And again, I put good into quotes because it's conventional wisdom. But we make reasons for these things all the time. And the reasons go something like this. I can go or I can do something. I can't go or I can't do something because I might feel or I might think or I might get something else. That's the basic formula, right? So you can say something like this. I can't stay in this trade because I might think I'll have a loss and feel fear, okay? Or I can't pull the trigger on this trade, not because it's not a good setup, but because I will feel bad about myself if I have a loss. All these kind of crazy thoughts and feelings that we all have, right? There's two things about reason giving that really sets us up for a struggle with our fear and our anxieties. When we give reasons for our experiences, and these reasons, I should say it this way, we give reasons for our experiences, and the impact is that these put an emotional discomfort between us and doing what's important. An emotional discomfort even more so than the discomfort of the fear and the discomfort of the anxiety. So we start saying things like, I can't take this trade because, just fill in the blank, I can't stand the fear. Or I have to exit early because I'm crawling out of my skin, right? It starts to grow a little life of its own. And then it begins to, the reason giving begins along these lines. It sort of says, in order to do what I want, I have to take care of the discomfort first. So that kind of translates into, if I want to trade well, then first I have to get rid of the fear and the anxiety. And that leads us directly into getting trapped into trying to make the discomfort go away. And if we look at this, and this is just a partial list of things that I've come across in my own work with other traders and that I know from my own work with myself, these are things we try to do to take the discomfort away. We try to distract ourselves. Maybe we're surfing the net. We talked about suppressing thoughts and feelings or changing, thoughts into positive self-talk and taking the anxiety. taking the self out of the anxiety, talking ourselves out of anxiety and fear. All of that stuff doesn't work. How about educating ourselves about anxiety and fear, reading books on it, becoming experts on fear and anxiety? It's one of the reasons why a lot of psychologists go into psychology, myself included. I mean, I had difficulties with this stuff outside of trading before I even got into trading, and I needed to know how to deal with this stuff, right? It's one of the reasons why I became a psychologist, so I know about, in a very personal way, fear and anxiety. Reading self-help books, another possible solution. Taking medications, Xanax is a good one, right? Or some of the anti-anxiety medications. They work fine in the short term, but once you're off them, the anxiety immediately comes back. Herbal supplements and vitamins is another one. Alcohol and drugs, they have the same effect as medications, right? People do that. Getting into a chat room, very nice distraction. Keeping a lucky coin on our desk or some little talisman or doing some sort of ritual. Rituals, by the way, are helpful. Routines are helpful, like going through your charts the night before, figuring out the support and resistance levels, trying to identify where trades might set up. Great routine. Another great routine is just checking through until you get this really down, checking through your trade checklist before you take a trade, looking for the sign of strength followed by a test. That's a good thing to do. You see tennis players do this all the time. Golfers do this all the time. Watch, I'm blanking on her name now. She's a great tennis player. I'll probably remember it after Maria Sharapova. Before she goes to serve, if you're into tennis at all, she has a whole ritual and routine that she does. But that's useful. It's when the ritual or routine is in the service of the fear or the anxiety that it's not such a good thing. Relaxation and meditation, again, in the service of fear, not in the service of trading well. Studying another trading book, looking for better indicators. We already talked about this in terms of additional information. And the list goes on and on and on, okay? And again, it's because we care about our trading. We really want this to be right? So, you know, we need to stop doing the things that are, we know this stuff doesn't work, and we need to stop doing the things that are useless. And the real question for you is, as traders, is how have these well-intentioned coping strategies worked for you? And think about these both in terms of short-term and long-term. And typically what we find is that in the short term they have some effect. They do work a little bit. We pick up a new trading book and we feel relieved that we're going to learn something new. But in the long term it doesn't really work. We already have in VSA the stuff we need. We don't need another trading book to deal with fear and anxiety. We need to deal with that in a different way. And the question becomes then, what have you given up for your fear and anxiety? Money certainly is part of it, but it's also learning the knowledge and the skills and the abilities that you need to have that lead to confident trading. And I'm not trying to make this into a bummer for you, but unless we really look and take stock at this stuff, and we really know that things don't work for us, this experience, we need to know this in our own experience, then we're likely just to go on repeating them over and over again and getting the same results that we always got. And we're going to be caught in that endless loop of feeling good temporarily, but not really solving the problem. So two crucial questions you've got to answer, I'm inviting you to answer, is what specifically do you do to cope with your fear and anxiety, and how exactly has this worked out for you? And I've designed a little action item exercise for us to do during the next couple of weeks, and I'm going to send you this, and there's good instruction on how to fill this form out, and it's very helpful to do. Traders appreciate doing this. But you go back over the past several weeks and try to identify situations that created the fear and anxiety response. You can also do this as you go through the course of the next 2 weeks at the end of the trading day and identify. It's good for that as well. Identify fear responses and anxious responses. And I'll just go through this briefly with you. You write down, just note down the situation. So in this example, the trader saw a clear test after a sign of strength. Yep, I can do that. 2 crucial questions you need to ask. Sorry, Jim asked me if I could put these back up again. What specifically do you do to cope with fear and anxiety? And exactly how well has this worked for you? No problem, Jim. So, and as I said, on the little workbook that I put together, and I will email you later after this is over. And if you didn't hear me before, send me your email. I'll put up my email again. It's up there, but I'll stick it up there again. Send me your email and just put in the subject line, the fear seminar, and I will email this out to you. And I checked in with Gavin, and that's okay with him. Okay, so you just note down the situation. I saw, in this case, the trader saw a clear test after a sign of strength, a great trade in VSA. And but she then in the next column we note down a little bit of the experience of fear so that we begin to get a good sense of this. You know, awareness of this stuff is really helpful for us because we can actually, when we start to feel the tension and the numb feeling that she's talking about here, these can become a little signal for us to do something different than respond to the fear, okay? Oftentimes it's just so automatic we don't even consciously recognize that we're feeling these things. It just happens to us, and we start to take action. I want you to slow down and separate and put those feelings and those thoughts out in front of you a little bit. Get a little bit of distance on them, and this is one of the ways to do that. Then note down in the third column the coping or the control strategy that you did. In this case, she didn't take the trade. What was the effect on her? Well, she felt immediate relief, she says, but then she saw the market rally and she felt down about not ever being able to be good at trading. She had some negative thoughts come in. And then a little bit about the costs. She says here, I lost out on a good profit and I missed the opportunity to make a solid trade. Okay? So go through the last several weeks and fill those out. And then what I'd like you to do is take the coping strategies from the third column in that first form, and then just do a little cost-benefit analysis. This is really helpful. And again, this is getting to your experience of the things that you do to control your coping, or to control your fear and cope with your anxiety. Okay? And as I said, don't take my words for it. Experience this. So just to go through, we'll go through the first example here. So she pulled down, avoiding pulling the trigger. She saw that sign of strength and the test that followed, but she hesitated and didn't take the trade. So she avoided pulling the trigger. That was her coping strategy. In the short term, she knows that she missed a good profit. She said that before, and she felt that. In the longer term, the costs are that she says it's going to keep me out of many good trades, and I'm not really learning or improving. And you know, when I get right down to it, I kind of feel like a loser in all of this, especially long term if I keep doing this over and over again. What were the benefits now? We have to always assess the benefits because, you know, there are good things that we get out of doing these things, even though they may not be the best for us in our trading. Well, short term, she felt some relief. She felt less anxious, and that was a real benefit, no question about it. But long term, she wasn't even sure if there are any long-term benefits out of this kind of coping strategy. Okay? And that's the kind of assessment you need to do. What kind of benefits are you getting short-term? What kind of benefits are you getting long-term against the costs that you're experiencing? And it's helpful to be aware of this stuff. And as I say, have your own experience with this. So trying to make the discomfort go away is something that we all try to do, but all of that stuff for the reasons of fusion and avoidance in particular, but also our evaluations and our reason giving, all of this makes it very difficult and makes the fear be something that we get ensnared in. But if we're willing to risk something a little bit new, and I'm going to show you specific ways to do this, then we can get different results. And let's just take a look here at this graphic. This is this picture here to the right. This is the anxiety monster, and I think you can tell which one that is, and the trader. And they're struggling over, they're having a tug of war, and they're struggling over fear and anxiety. Every time the anxiety monster tugs on the rope, we as traders pull back on the rope, trying to pull that anxiety monster down. And I know it's kind of hokey, this idea of anxiety monster, but just this tug of war between fear and anxiety and trying to trade well is the analogy that I'm trying to draw here, right? And we're constantly at this. Sebastian said the war is going on. This is kind of the war here that we're having, right? Between the anxiety monster and you, this tug of war. And you might get to the point where you think, gee, if I just read one more book, get one more better indicator, just study this a little bit more, or just suppress my feelings a little bit more, I may be able to tug that anxiety monster right down and never have to deal with this fear and anxiety stuff again. But we all know that that anxiety monster pulls us right back, no matter how hard we struggle, right? So knowing that this is the struggle going on, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, what do you think might be a solution here? What else, or is there something else you can do since pulling on the rope doesn't seem to work? Anybody have any ideas? Nobody? Scott's got one. And so does George. Let go. Excellent. Eric and Debbie say let go. Yeah, drop the rope. Drop the rope. Drop the rope. Right? No, Jocko, I wouldn't say a coping mechanism. I'm just thinking about dropping the rope. And not even so much about David and Goliath, because David had that slingshot and used that to kill off the Goliath, right? But it's dropping the rope, not choosing to struggle with the fear. And I know this is hard. I told you in the beginning as a warning that some of this stuff is going to be hard to get your mind around. And this is kind of the hard part of getting your mind around. But when we're tugging on the rope, we're fused with that fear, with those thoughts of fear and with those emotions of fear. It's, yeah, don't worry, be happy. Gavin says that. Or we can sell them the rope. That's good. Okay, now we got the creativity kicking in. But the fusion with the anxiety monster is the idea here. And it's taking those thoughts, it's putting the anxiety monster out there in front of us, getting some distance on us, and when we do that, we're then in a position where we can drop the rope. All right. Are you guys up for another little experiential exercise? I want to do a little bit of mindfulness with you. I don't know if it's ever been done over the internet before, but I want to try it here. And you're free to participate if you're willing, and that's a good thing because I think you'll get some benefit out of it. But if you're not willing, that's okay too. You don't have to participate in this, but I think you'll enjoy the experience. So if you're willing, here's what I'd ask you to do. Just get comfortable in your chair, uncross your legs, both feet on the floor, and uncross your arms. Just have them by your sides or in your lap, either on the chair or on the desk in front of you. Doesn't matter. And once you're comfortable, I'll ask you to take a deep breath in, and as you exhale, just allow your eyes to close. Take another deep breath and notice how your belly rises, and then as you exhale, how it falls. And another breath, and you might notice the air coming in and out of your nostrils. Now, let go of your breathing and just breathe as you will. And notice how your back meets the chair. Feel those sensations. And notice where your legs touch the seat of the chair. And notice where the pressure comes in, where your legs meet the surface of the chair occurs. And notice your arms and your hands, wherever they touch, and the sensations. You might direct your attention up to your face and just notice the air around your face. Perhaps it's cool or maybe it's warm. Just notice. Now I'd ask you to return your attention back to your breathing, just for a few moments. Try to be like a scientist, noticing exactly when the inhale starts and exactly when you shift from inhale to exhale. Observe this for a few moments. Now you might be noticing your thoughts are wandering off your breath. And that's okay. Just gently return to your breath. Follow your breath in and out. And you might notice your mind wandering once again. Perhaps it's saying, how long is this guy going to make us do this anyway? Well, thank your mind for this thought, or whatever thoughts you are thinking, and return once again to your breathing. Now I'll ask you to reorient back to the room you're in for a moment. Reconnect with your surroundings. And when you're ready, open your eyes. And that, my friends, was an experience in mindfulness. And in your workbook that I'll send you, there's another written mindfulness exercise and experience that you can do. But I want to ask you a little bit about what that was like for you. What did you experience here? Anybody want to give us a sense of what the experience was like for them? We're getting some folks saying that relaxation, a little difficult to let go in the beginning, but there was relaxation that came in. Yeah, mindfulness does that. It stopped Laura's labor pains. Great. Good one, Gavin. Yeah, but that's what happens with mindfulness. And that's because we focus our attention on a specific thing. I was having you do your breath. It's always with you. It's a good thing to focus on. And the reason why it's so relaxing is because we're focusing on one thing. And the nice thing about focusing on one thing is that It's a great, great, great way to improve concentration. So it's a terrific little exercise for trading. It builds skills in attentiveness and concentration in trading. So it's very useful in that regard. George says something interesting, though. His mind wandered often. And I wonder if other people had that experience too, because that's a very, that is the common experience, that our minds do wander tremendously when we are attempting to be focused on one thing. Ah, good, Jim. You're paying more attention to me after the exercise because you got a sense of peace from that. Terrific. You know, this is old stuff, old stuff coming out of the yogis of India and the Far East. Oh gosh, I would think about 3,000 years old, give or take. We often think about mindfulness and meditation, and mindfulness is a form of meditation. We often think about it coming from the Buddha, but the Buddha actually was a yogi, and the yogis were the folks who developed meditation and mindful practice. In fact, yoga, if you read some of the very early texts from people like Patanjali, you'll see that yoga really isn't about postures and asanas and all of that sort of stuff. Yoga is about mindfulness and developing the mind. So they've been working on this for a long, long time. So the practices are old, but the science is new. This is what we know is very helpful for us in terms of improving our attention and concentration and being able to separate noticing the thoughts as the thoughts, being able to separate the thoughts from the fused actions that we take, being able to diffuse things, being able to not avoid and choose between proper trading behavior and fear-based behavior. All right, so this is mindfulness, and there's lots of great places to be mindful. Be mindful in a separate quiet area, kind of like what we did today. You know, a great one is when you're doing a shower, and I find it very hard to be mindful. And I'm talking about notice how you're, you know, putting the soap on the washcloth and washing yourself and shampooing your hair and all the stuff that you do in the shower. Notice where your thoughts are going when you're taking a shower. It's not on washing, I can tell you that. But it's a great way to practice mindfulness. And the practice has to be a practice because you can't just do it once. It's like exercise and building muscles. The more you do it, the better you're going to be at it. Another place is washing the dishes. And I know we all have dishwashers, or most of us do, but take a couple of dishes and actually wash them after dinner tonight. Actually get into the mindfulness of washing the dishes. Pay attention to washing the dishes. When your thoughts wander, which they will do in any of these examples or exercises, that's okay. Notice it and gently bring it back to washing the dishes. You can be mindful when you're talking with your significant other. When she or he says something you don't like, or you know, something you prefer not to talk about, or notice. Be mindful at that moment. Those are the good times to be mindful. Certainly in trading, Gavin says, I get all my ideas in the shower. Yeah, the ions, I think, in the shower somehow stimulate the brain, and it causes us to think more. So that's why mindfulness is particularly difficult in the shower, but it's a good place to practice it. Certainly trading is a great place to practice it, and I'll encourage you to be mindful for the next 10 minutes. Notice where your thoughts go in the next 10 minutes, because I know they're going to drift off to someplace, and that's okay. Just gently bring them back. And as we practice mindfulness more and more, we begin to recognize when we get fearful, and instead of getting fused into the fearfulness, we can notice what those thoughts and feelings really are, and we can bring ourselves back to the important trading behaviors that we want to cultivate and encourage. Okay? That's why we do this sort of stuff. It's not just for becoming yogis and peaceniks. It's It's got real practical uses. So it's noticing how thoughts and feelings and images and memories and sensations are not really controllable. Somebody described it as your mind is being like a puppy, and you want to tie that puppy up to a post and keep it from running here, there, hither, and yon, and all. And that's what mindfulness does. The practice of meditation, the practice of mindfulness, it brings us into the point where we can not control our thoughts, but recognize our thoughts as just thoughts and feelings as just feelings, images, memories as just themselves and nothing more, and be centered and be focused on things and not be hooked by our thoughts and our feelings and our images and our memories. All right, so we're covering a lot of ground here. We talked about fusion, avoidance, evaluation, reason giving, seeking to escape and avoid internal states. Those are the two key things, because their internal states get fused, or our internal states get fused. We tend to shift from a task focus or a task relevant focus into our, right? We're thinking about our fear and how we got to get out of the trade. We're not really focused on what's the right task to do next here. Maybe it's looking for a widespread bar with volume increasing, closing in the middle, that's going to get us out of that trade or cause us to start thinking about getting out of that trade. Instead, we're just focused on the fear, not on the task. Okay? And we also shift from a task focus to an outcomes focus. The fear brings us to, what's this trade going to be? Is it going to be a winner or a loser? And what's going to happen? I want to talk a little bit, and I'm going to try to go through this fairly quickly. I want to talk about process versus results, because this is important. Process means nothing more than a task focus, and results mean nothing more than the outcomes of a trade. Okay? So what do we mean by process thinking? I'm talking about thinking about our decisions and judging our decisions not by the results of the trades, not by the outcomes, but by how they were made, the process that we used to make those decisions, okay? And the process that we use to manage our trades. It's not that results don't matter. Of course they matter. We've got to make money. We've got to have more winners than losers, or we have to make more money on our winners than we do on our losers, right? But judging only on results puts you into a trap. We're caught on one side of the paradox of trading. And the paradox of trading is this. On any given trade, you never really know whether it's going to come out as a winner or a loser. We just don't know because it's probabilistic. And we talked about that a little bit earlier on. But over a large number of trades, if we have an edge, and VSA gives us a wonderful edge, we're going to be profitable over a large sample. So that's the paradox. On a trade-by-trade basis, the market's relatively uncertain. But over a large sample of trades, the market is pretty predictable, and the outcome is pretty certain. Okay? But if we're only focused on outcome, then we're on the scary side of that paradox, right? And yes, Scott, it is kind of like grading execution over results. But it's not even really grading so much. It is grading. I shouldn't say that. It is. It's grading and judging how you get into the trade and how you manage the trade rather than on the outcomes, okay? And when we do that, we get a higher level of truth, because if we have the VSA edge and we're trading that test after a sign of weakness, we're going to lose some of the time, but over many trades, we're going to win more than we lose, and we're going to be profitable. So this gives us a little bit of psychological cover, and that's a help, right? Some trades are going to be losers, but we're covered on that when we start to think like this. Sounds like the Zen of trading. In a way, yeah, it is. I mean, I said that we go back several thousands of years on the practice of this, but the science of it is new, and it is kind of like the Zen of trading. So otherwise you're going to get hooked by fear and anxiety, and we know what happens. We start to get erratic with that. We talked a lot about those today. So we're looking to develop an internally based confidence that comes from knowing when the odds are in our favor, and it also comes from having a willingness to take a loss, because we know that sometimes it's going to happen, and it's coming from a knowing that you traded well according to your plan. Yeah, trade to trade well. Exactly, that's right. There's an internal versus an external confidence. An external confidence is based on results. It's based on the outcomes of the trade. But we're depending on the market. Is the market volatile enough today for us to make a good trade? Or is it too volatile? Or is it too volatile where we can't really trade? Or is it just a flat market? We can never really know what the market's going to offer us. And so when we are basing our process and our living and dying on the results of every little trade, we're giving the market, we're giving our confidence over to the market, and that's like riding a roller coaster. It's not a good way to do. Internal confidence, the opposite of external confidence. Internal confidence comes from having knowledge, skills, and abilities, and executing these and executing them well, and that comes from practice. Confidence comes from having an internal level of confidence, not from an external confidence. It comes from developing the knowledge, skills, and abilities, or the process of trading, not from the results of trading. All right, I'm going to skip this part. Just as a quick curiosity, how many trades does everybody make on a given day or a given week? Just give me a basic number. Are you making 3 trades a day? Are you making 10 trades a day? How many are you making? 3 a day? Three to 4 a day, 4 to 5 a day. Okay, let's just take 2 to 5 a day. Let's just take the 3 a day example. So that's about 15 a week. And if we traded, say, 50, Tom, you're even more so. This is going to even apply to you even more. But if we're trading, so we're making 3 trades a day on average, 15 a week. If we're trading 50 weeks a year, that's 750 trades. So what's the significance of a single trade here? Right? One trade out of 750 over the course of the year. One trade doesn't have a lot of significance. And in Tom's case, if he's scalping 10 a day, I mean, the numbers just get astronomical. You know, if you're looking at the percentages of one trade to 750, it's pretty thin if we did that on a calculator. And if we did Tom's 5 to 10, you know, it would be infinitesimal. Yet we make the error of living or dying on the outcome of every single trade, and that's not process thinking. Process thinking is thinking in terms of large samples, okay? When you begin to develop an orientation to process and you start to use the mindfulness things that we talked about a little bit today, and I'm going to talk a lot about next time, you can get to the point where you can enter any trade, take a loss or do damage control, whatever you need to do, and that's okay. And this really is the edge. This is your psychological edge or your performing edge. It's the real edge. The struggle with fear and anxiety decreases, your confidence starts to rise, your willingness to take appropriate risks begin to increase. You can step up size, for example. Your profitability is going to increase. Everything is related here. It's all related. So process versus outcome is a fundamental concept to get a good grasp on. we talk about the results focus on results are understandable, but over the long term, process dominates outcomes. That's the case in any probabilistic field, whether you're doing trading, horse betting, or any probabilistic field. The process always is going to dominate outcomes. And sometimes we're going to make decisions and they're going to lead to bad outcomes, and sometimes we're going to make bad decisions and it's going to lead to good outcomes. And here's a little useful way to think about this. This is a little 2x4 table where results are on the top, or outcomes are on the top, and the process used to make a decision is on the right-hand side. So a good process gets a good result, and you deserve that success, right? A good process gets a bad result, a loss, well, that's unlucky, right? You follow me here? A poor process, though, gets a good result. That's really just dumb luck, because over time, we all know that trader is going to fail, right? And a poor process that gets a bad result is kind of like poetic justice, according to the folks who developed this little table, Russo and Schumacher. By the way, Winning Decisions is a pretty cool little book. But when the process is influenced by fear and anxiety, we're using a poor process, right? And we're getting a lot of bad results because our trading behavior becomes erratic. And if we don't have that good process and we're getting bad results, we're eventually going to be taken out of the market. It's as simple as that. So process versus outcome is another way to think about this, another useful way to think about this. So now the question is, what will you do about this? What exactly will you do to begin to focus on the process of trading? What specific trading relevant tasks or behaviors are important? And think about internal versus external confidence. We want to build that internal confidence. What exactly does internal confidence look like? Well, I was going to ask you if you could tell me in a brief sentence what let's just see. What in a brief sentence would internal confidence look like if you could see it? What do you think that might look like? And then I'll tell you what I think it might be. It might be helpful to compare here, because there's no one specific right answer. Anybody want to give a suggestion? Having a plan. That's part of it for sure. Absence of negative self-talk, easier to concentrate. I'm waiting for a couple of more here. I can see people typing. So I want to give them a chance. Ask questions, look for the clues, make the trade. I like that, George. That's process thinking. Very good. Optimistic expectations. Yeah, we have to be optimistic, right? When I think of this, here's what I think internal confidence looks like. And this isn't necessarily the truth. It's just my opinion. But I think it looks like you're focused on the relevant tasks of trading. You're making proper decisions given what the market has to offer. Okay? That you're focused on the relevant tasks of trading. You're making proper decisions, or maybe you're making decisions in a proper way. Maybe that's the better way to say it. You're making decisions in the proper way given what the market has to offer. Okay? So here I'm going to ask you to do another action item. And in your packet, I have this form for you, but I'm going to go back to the previous slide here. And I'm going to ask you to develop a list of trading behaviors you would want to follow. In other words, I'd like you to identify, and this is for you more so, and it's only if you're willing, of course, but to identify the trading relevant tasks that are important to your trading. Okay? So what would it look like? Here's some questions you can think about. What would it look like if you were trading confidently day after day? What specific skills, knowledge, and abilities would you be able to observe, assuming you could observe them? List these out, okay? You want to avoid things like, I would be calm, or I wouldn't be fearful, or I'd be trading well, because those are kind of general. Try to be very specific. Try to be very specific in how you describe these. The key idea here is that I want to try to get you to start shifting the time spent suffering with fear and anxiety and shift that over to engaging in good trading behaviors that are valuable to you, right? That's the idea. And we have to know what those valuable trading behaviors are before we can shift over to them. That's the reason for this exercise, okay? One helpful way to do this would be to visualize how an expert trader would act. What actions would they do? If you were able to get into their head, what would they be thinking as they're looking at the market, pulling the trigger, managing the trade, exiting the trade, and reviewing their results? What would they be thinking? What would their head be saying to themselves? Okay? The basic idea here is to think carefully about what kinds of behavior and actions are valuable in trading. I don't think we ever think about this very much. I am encouraging you to think about it. What kinds of behaviors and what kinds of actions? And by the way, thoughts and feelings are behaviors too. But, so are perceiving the market properly, all of that stuff are behaviors. But what sorts of things bring us closer to our trading goals? What are the knowledge and the skills and the abilities you want to acquire and you want to use instead of focusing on fear? And again, I'm talking really about trading behaviors that give value because they lead to sound trading and they lead to confident trading. So remember that question I asked early on? Are you interested in becoming more confident and having less struggle? Think about it this way. Are you interested in making trading behaviors that you value and have less struggle with fear? And again, we're going to shift the time from struggling with fear to time in valued behaviors. And as I suggested before, to do this, we first have to identify them. And that will also be on the workbook form that I hand out. Okay? All right, we're coming to the end here. I'm sorry I went over a little bit. But let's just take a look at what we covered today. We talked about the 4 primary trading fears, and we talked a little bit about hope and greed being part of that. We talked about that vicious cycle of fear and success, that fear creates erratic trading behavior, and that we do things to relieve the fear, to get rid of the fear, but it's only temporary. And we've never, if we keep doing that, we're never going to be able to learn how to become great traders. Changing this definitely requires some work. I'm not saying that this is easy. But go back to Emerson's quote for a minute. This is the reason why I put this up there. The task ahead is never as great as the power behind us. You've got the ability to do this. It's just putting the effort in and asking questions. And I'll show you some pretty cool stuff next time, how to do this. But I had to set the groundwork here. So I had to set the foundation for us. And part of that foundation was discussing what makes fear and anxiety so problematic. And we talked about fear, evaluation, avoidance, and reason giving, and we emphasized fusion and avoidance as the 2 key things. Fusion, again, is failing to see our thoughts as thoughts, that we're looking through them as if we're putting on a pair of colored glasses, some sunglasses. We're looking through the glasses of fearful thoughts, and everything looks fearful. The market looks fearful to us because we have those glasses on. And I'm suggesting that we defuse and we set those thoughts out in front of us a little bit. Mindfulness is really helpful in this. And we see our thoughts as we're focusing on our breath, and we have those thoughts about what are we going to do for dinner tonight? I've got to pick up the kids in a little bit. Whatever those, those extraneous thoughts are, we see them, we notice them, we don't have to act on them. We can gently bring our mind back after thanking it for giving us those thoughts, because that's what our minds do, that's what minds do. Bringing our mind gently back to the task at hand, which in the mindfulness exercise was breathing. Okay? It's the whole idea there. And avoidance, we talked about that, giving us temporary relief, but giving us that temporary relief is highly reinforcing, it's highly addictive, and we're going to keep going back to that and back to that unless we realize that those strategies that we're using aren't very effective. And that's why I'm asking you to look at those over the course of the next 2 weeks and spend some time with that, so that you, in your own experience, you recognize that they're not useful. And I'm going to ask you then to do something new, and that's a little bit risky. It's dropping that rope, that in the tug of war with anxiety. It's stop feeding the tiger out of your trading bowl and start keeping your trading chow for yourself, so that you can develop into the great trader that you can be. And part of the way we do this is I introduce mindfulness tonight as a way to do this, and I just talked a little bit about that. Bringing your mind back onto what's the most important thing to you. And that's valued trading behaviors. And we're talking about developing those, shifting from the focus on the self, the focus on outcomes, to a focus on the process of trading. And I'm asking you to list out valued trading behaviors that relate to the process of trading, bring you more confidence, and bring you better trading behavior or valued trading behavior. And I've asked you if you're willing to do a few things in the next 2 weeks. Notice your hooks. Notice when you get hooked, and we all do. We all do all the time. And keep a little journal and jot down those hooks, and not just in trading, but in life as well. And always notice what you do next. Notice your hooks. Notice what you do next. And if you have trouble noticing your hooks, notice when you get tense. That's when they're going to start coming out. List out your coping strategies. Do a little cost-benefit analysis on those coping strategies. Try doing mindfulness for 5 minutes a day through the rest of the week and next week. And then develop a list of a personal list of valued trading behaviors. Now, next week, in 2 weeks, on the 21st, I want to review these coping strategies and the cost-benefit analysis, and I want to review the valued trading behaviors. But I'm going to give you much more on noticing and mindfulness. I'm going to give you 2 trading-specific methods to bring your mindfulness into your trading. And I think what's kind of a fun but very practical and if I do say so myself, a pretty cool way of doing it. And I'm going to show you some ways to fortify your acceptance of the uncomfortable thoughts and feelings, because they're going to occur, and how to enhance your commitment to effective trading. And I want to ask you to do something else. I'm going to ask you, and only if you're willing, you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but I'm going to ask you, as volunteers, if you wouldn't mind sending in to me by return email your coping strategies and costs and your valued trading behaviors. And I'm asking you to do that, and I will treat them with the utmost of confidence. You should understand that psychologists, first and foremost, always protect their clients, and I consider all of you my clients in this. We always protect the confidentiality of our clients. So I wouldn't say that Gordon says, or Jim says, or Jock says X, Y, or Z. But I would like them because I'd like to be able to present back to the group some of the things that people use as coping and what they found out about it, and some of the things that they find as valued trading behaviors, because we can all learn from one another. We might see something in that list that we didn't think about, but that, gee, that makes sense for us, and that we want to incorporate in our own trading, in our own lives, okay? So when I ask you to do this, as I say, I'll treat it with the utmost of confidentiality, and I will report them, but I will report them only as a group. I will say, well, one member suggested X, Y, or Z, and another member noted this, and that's how I would treat it. So if you're willing, and on a volunteer basis only, you do not have to do this if you don't want to. I would ask you to send those in to me a couple of days before, say on the 19th of February, if you don't mind doing that, and I would appreciate that very much. And I want to say I apologize for taking us over the time limits, but I want to thank you very, very, very much for this. I hope you got something out of it. I've had a lot of fun doing this, and I think you'll find that the next session will be able to merge and integrate some of the stuff that we talked about today with some practical things on how to use this, and hopefully it will be very useful for you. Okay? Well, thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. And again, if you haven't sent me your email, I'm sorry, the 21st, not next week, and if you haven't sent me your email, do so, and I'll post that one more time. Oh, it's right here, in fact, on the last slide, so I don't even need to post it. All right, thank you very much. And Eric and Debbie, thank you both.
Okay, hi everybody, it's Gavin. Just want to echo that. Sorry, Gary, just want to echo that. I think you did a great job. Really, really good. I've got a lot of, I watched most of it, Gary, even though Laura's been waddling around in some pain here. But she did listen to that calming words there of yours. So excellent job, mate. Very, very impressed. Thank you very much. And, you know, looking forward to welcoming you back to the session in 2 weeks' time. So I think Gary did a great job, everybody, and I'm sure that the next session will bring it all together. So it has been recorded. I'll check the archive, Gary. And I'll give you a call back after we've closed the session here. So if there's any questions for anybody, please feel free to type them in. Got a very busy week coming up next week for Trade Guider. But on behalf of the Trade Guider company, I want to thank you all for attending and thank Gary Dayton. Excellent job, Gary. Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you for this next session in 2 weeks' time. Thank you.